Hello, everybody, and welcome to Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 2. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a retrospective on this. It's been a while, and I am currently a little under the weather, so I apologize if my voice is kind of crappy. But my last video on Ultimate Alliance 1, the last two videos actually, kind of talked about the pros and cons of the game, why I enjoyed it, why I didn't enjoy it, all kinds of stuff like that. Ultimate Alliance 2 is a bit of a different animal, however. If you want me to sum it up for you, if you take everything great about the first game and then either minimize it or take it out completely, you have Ultimate Alliance 2. The story and the dialogue isn't really all that entertaining. There are far less characters to play as, even with the DLC that was added later. The powers are gone. The combat is a lot more dumbed down. And even with the inclusion of, like, the combo super move things, as a whole, the game is a lot more streamlined, yes, but in that streamlining, it is taking a lot away from the game. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the gameplay. I'm replaying the tutorial area because I haven't played this game in a while, but I'm playing with Venom, which I'll get to later, Carnage, Iron Fist, and Spider-Man, which makes up the team Maximum Carnage, I think? And as a whole, gameplay is mostly the same, if a little bit more clunky. You can still grab things, but it's a bit different based off of what hero you are. If you're a bigger hero like Venom, you can pick enemies up and, like, toss them and beat them and stuff like that. If you're like Spider-Man or Iron Fist, I'm pretty sure it's the same mechanic that it was in the previous game. Notable thing for me is that the gameplay as a whole seems a bit more clunky. Like, the general idea is still the same, you know. X is your standard punch, circle is your strong attack, and square is your grab, with triangle being jump. You can switch between 4 heroes. The notable difference here is that you can change your team at any time. Like, if I go in here, I can swap a hero at any time. If I decide that I want to call in Iceman, I can totally do that. Excuse me, everybody. Fortunately, I am going to be sticking with my boy Venom here. But just looking at it, you can also tell that the game seems a bit slower as a whole. Like, look at how slow Venom is running, you know. And even with web swinging, it's still very slow. Now, whether or not this is an intentional decision on behalf of the game developers, or if this was just something that happened, it makes the gameplay feel a little bit more slower. Like, just, yeah, so I can pick these up. Always hit these guys first in a fight. Otherwise they'll just keep picking you off. You can use powers. Venom can tongue people to death. I don't know what that does, but I think it was cool, you know. But my point is the gameplay feels a bit more slow, and it looks great. I'm not going to say that it doesn't.
I could have beaten you as Scorpion.
What? I don't get it, but okay. But there's a lot that goes on, and it's a little strange. Now, for the sake of just talking for a bit, I am going to talk about the story. Now, for those of you who've played this game, I mean, no offense. I love this game. It's not a it's not a bad game. It's just it didn't really live up to the expectations of the first. And a lot of times that is the case with a lot of different games and media in general, you know, movies, books, all that stuff. But the story is probably one of the weakest points. The whole plot of the game revolves around the Civil War comic, right? Not Captain America Civil War, even though that was also inspired by the Civil War comic. The original Civil War comic. In this, superheroes are supposed to be registered by the government and basically become, you know, soldiers for the government. Captain America, needless to say, does not sign on to that, and Iron Man does. Now, if you play through the game, you're going to learn very quickly that Cap's team is probably in the right because as the game is played, Iron Man's team ends up creating like these little nanites and stuff like that, and those nanites control supervillains, which is why we're allowed to play as characters like Venom or Psylocke or Magneto, Green Goblin, so and so. And it genuinely feels, well, I'll get to that in a second. As the plot progresses, there are spoilers for this game if you haven't played it. There are spoilers, so if you do not want to be spoiled, I suggest you skip ahead by about a minute or two. So, as the plot progresses, the nanites that are controlling the supervillains eventually end up gaining some sort of sentience, and they end up trying to take over the world. Specifically, they do this by trying to go to Wakanda, and they end up corrupting Nick Fury and a bunch of other superheroes, all that stuff, leading to the superheroes' teams to kind of come back together and work with each other. And then they all lived happily ever after. What makes the this a bad thing is that the inclusion of the nanites at all just kind of makes it feel forced. It feels kind of like a cheap way to get people to have the opportunity to play as a villain. And even though I haven't played Ultimate Alliance 3 all that much, that's one thing that you're able to do pretty much from the get-go is play as villains. How do they do that, you might ask? Well, they use Venom as an example, I think. Venom, you fight him, and he's like, yo, because you trust me, I'm gonna fight for you guys. And that's it. It's just him saying, you know what? I'm bored. Let's go. And that's the whole plot point for him being in the game. Even though that's a little ridiculous, it makes a lot more sense to do that than to have this big old convoluted like mind control plot that ends up with you fighting. Oh, I can't swap heroes at this time. I was gonna bring it up to Nick Fury, because if you can't tell, Nick Fury is in the top left of like the teams, and he's just a big old metal man. He's a nanite man. As a whole, it just feels forced and, quite frankly, unenjoyable. Now, another thing that I have a problem with this game is that it does not change based off of what team you pick. The only thing that changes are the characters you're able to play as, and even that doesn't really change all that much. For instance, if you pick Team Iron Man, you can play as Iron Man. And if you pick Team Cap, you can play as Cap. There's a few differences in there, but because the roster of heroes is so small, like, I mean, look at it. I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say that without the DLC, this roster is maybe 1/4 of what the roster was in the first game. Maybe 1/2. It's hard to tell just by looking at them, but ignoring DLC completely, it's clear that the roster is not very hefty. And honestly, it takes a lot from it. In all honesty, it takes a lot from it. But back what I was saying, nothing really changes. Characters you can play as, bosses you fight, and your objectives. But those objectives play out in the exact same way. The map layout is exactly the same. The general idea of what's going on is exactly the same. For instance, in one of the earlier missions where you split up the team and you are going to attack one of Cap's bases. If you are going to attack Cap's base and you're playing as Team Iron Man, you progress through the level pretty normally, and then you get to a boss fight. That boss fight is none other than Spider-Woman, right? So you kick her ass, you do the thing that you normally do in these kinds of games, and you do your thing, right? Well, then you keep progressing through the base, and eventually you get to either the point where you destroy the base or till you find what you need. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've played it. As I'm saying, I'm just now starting the opening mission again. But if you're playing as Team Cap, the exact same events occur. You trek through the streets leading up to the base. You find the base. Who do you find waiting for you? Black Widow. So you kick her ass. You deal with that. And then you have to fight your way into your own base. It's very strange. And quite frankly, it doesn't really make any sense. You'd think that you'd be already in the base. Or at the very least, you'd have a way to get into the base without having to fight through Tony Stark's men. And this is present throughout the entire game. No matter which team you pick, you are always doing the exact same thing. Now, in this case, one has to ask, why did you have the team dynamic in the first place? Why not just have the experimental nanites and go from there? It feels like the plot is trying to do a bunch of different things at once without really accomplishing what it actually wants to do. Again, by no means is the game bad. It's not. It's just there's a lot of issues and design flaws that personally, for me, makes it a little unenjoyable. It's one of those games that I cannot bring myself to play over and over again. Whereas with Ultimate Alliance 1, I was able to play it, play through the entire game using 2 or 3 different teams, have a blast with it, and then immediately start over with another 3 or 4 different teams and feel like I'm playing an entirely different game, to an extent. Once again, the abilities here, let's just give a little... First of all, you can't change the abilities. There's only 4, and for some reason I only have 2 of them unlocked. I can tongue enemies with venom, and I can let go with spikes. Spider-Man, who can also swing around, and also only has 2 abilities. I can shoot bullets, and I can whip things around, just in a different way.
Ready to rumble.
Iron Fist. I admittedly don't know what that does. And then I've got a Shockwave. And then Carnage has a dash and a Shockwave. Do you see the problem? Admittedly, Admittedly, these are, at least Spider-Man and Carnage and Venom, are all very similar in what they can do, to an extent. But why is it that Iron Fist has a shockwave, he has a shockwave, and then these two characters have a shockwave? And bear in mind, this is just the first two abilities. The powers don't feel as diverse. In the first game, you could play the same team for hours with different powers and still have a good time. It feels like here, the abilities slowly start to get repetitive and, quite frankly, unenjoyable. And the same problem was present within the first game. For instance, you had Deadpool, Spider-Man, Human Torch, possibly Iceman. They all had, which was basically the same exact ability, the ability to shoot. Like, fully automatic. I don't know why I made the sound effect, but you get what I'm saying. Deadpool had his guns that he could shoot. Spider-Man shot webs. Iceman shot ice blades. And the Human Torch shot fireballs. Essentially the exact same ability. But because you could switch abilities around, you didn't have to do that. Now, if you really wanted to, I guess you could have had a team with all of those exact same abilities, but it wasn't something that happened in the game often, unless you intended it. Whereas here, it doesn't really matter who I'm playing as, because I've got a sweep. I've got a sweep that ends in a shockwave, mind you. I've got a shockwave.
You won't be sorry.
And I've got a shockwave. All of these abilities are AoE attacks. And quite frankly, the fact that they're all present in these varied heroes is a little disappointing. In addition to that, I'm going to go ahead and pause again. The costumes have been changed. There's only two. I'm pretty sure that's the Venom from Spider-Man Unleashed. No. Web of Shadows, that's what it's called. It looks like him anyway. These two are basically about as similar as you can get. There's no anti-venom, there's nothing like that, it's just the symbiote. The Iron Spider is pretty cool, as always. And some of the costumes are pretty varied, but sometimes they're just more of the same. That one does look cool, though. I'll give that one credit. My point is there's a lot going on, but they don't really capitalize on it. It really feels like they just kind of tossed this game together because, I don't want to say necessarily it's a cash grab, but sometimes it feels that way. Now, does that mean that I wouldn't recommend this game? No. If you're a fan of the first game, and you want some more epic Ultimate Alliance action, definitely get it. I would wait until it goes on sale, but definitely get it, because as a whole, it's a pretty decent experience. If you're not a big fan of the Ultimate Alliance games, or if you're trying to capitalize on some nostalgia, don't get this game. Like I said, Ultimate Alliance 1 for me was a very nostalgic experience. Somebody bought it for me when I was very young, and I was going through a rough patch in my life, so it's one of those games that whenever I play it, there's meaning to it, you know what I mean? And I am sorry for my nasally voice. But this game never really did that for me. I was excited to play it whenever I found out that there was another one, but it wasn't really for me, you know what I mean? So, in conclusion, first of all, I'm sorry I've been coughing so much. I've really been wanting to work on this video, especially now since I'm taking a small break from streaming. I wanted to really get to work on some YouTube content, so again, I apologize. But in conclusion, this game's fun, but it's not the prime experience. And it would be so much better if there's just a little bit more variety to what you could do. But the abilities are similar, the story is similar, the maps are exactly the fucking same. And that's the thing that gets me. You could have easily changed it up a little bit so that you were trying to escape the base, or you were trying to save some, like a fellow hero or something like that. But instead they make it pretty much the exact same experience, regardless of what team you're playing on. So, you know, in short, if I had to give this game a rating, let me go back. I don't think I did give Ultimate Alliance 1 a rating. But if I did, if I were to give Ultimate Alliance 1 a rating, I would give it like a 7 out of 10, an 8 out of 10. You know, because of the nostalgia, the gameplay, the variety, and the story, which, by the way, is very interesting, and if I'm not mistaken, it's original. If I were to give that one an 8 out of 10, I would probably give this game, at best, a 7. But if I had to, like, if I'm being completely honest, I'd probably give it like a 5.5 to a 6. It's not a bad experience, but you're only really going to enjoy it if you're like a diehard fan of Marvel. And coming from a diehard fan of Marvel, that's not necessarily an easy task, even when you are a diehard fan of Marvel. You know, but without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. If you have any thoughts, if you really like this game, and you really want to bash me for it, for my thoughts, by all means, put it in the comments, because it really does come down to a matter of opinion. Everybody has their own thoughts and ideas, and this is just my kind of thoughts on this. In the future, I will be doing coverage of Ultimate Alliance 3, but I have to finish it first. You know, I've never played it, so, you know, but thank you all for joining me. If you want to see some more of my Twitch exclusive content, make sure to check me out on twitch.tv/WyattDude11. I'm currently playing a bit of Minecraft, Black Ops Cold War, and The Sims, all of which are incredibly fun, if admittedly a lot very different. And if you want to see, if you enjoy the content that I've got here, make sure to like and subscribe. I've got some more stuff coming in the near future. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.